Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Refueling Station, where leaders of color can gain inspiration to live, do, and be well. And today I have a special episode. This live was actually created from the purpose of that centered around burnout, and it still is. However, today we are discussing the recent tragedy that happened at Lincoln University. And not to talk about the actual tragedy, we want to center this conversation around how it happens, what we can do to change the culture, because this is not an isolated incident. And this is one of the reasons that I founded the show, was because I knew it was an isolated incident. And when we think about self-care, I don't even like to use that term anymore because it's so prescriptive or so descriptive of just massages and bubble baths and this and that, but it's really about soul care. And because higher ed has been an important part of my life, a huge part of my identity, and I've been in some of these toxic workplaces, when I read the story, I read her email to the board and to the officials, and I saw myself in that. And that was a scary thing. And so I wanted to have this deep dive conversation, talk about when higher ed hurts and the toxicity that is pervasive in the culture. And why it's unfortunate, because hurt people, but also hurt people can't help the people that we need to, which is our students. And so we do this work. Higher ed is often done without resources. No one is in higher ed for the money. It is almost for the love of the students and for their journey of learning and for the empowerment, especially the empowerment of minorities and first gen students to have a better life. So sometimes we stay in it too long because our heart is just tied to it, but sometimes there needs to be a discussion of what could happen if we decide to reimagine the culture of higher education. So that's enough for me. I want to bring on my special guest for today, Dr. Candice Love Jackson. She is a former provost and author and a very experienced advocate in higher education. And welcome her now.
Hello, hello.
Hello, thank you for joining me. I want to, we're going to try to keep this formal, but Dr. Jackson and I are really good colleagues.
Yes.
And we talk often about higher ed leadership and culture and transformation. And so we're going to try to stick to the script, but chances are
We're
we're
not.
probably not. And that's okay. I'm telling myself right now that that is
That is
okay.
okay. Yes. Well, I'm excited to be here. I love what you're doing in this space. So um it's just a pleasure to maintain that connection because as your viewers may not know that we met uh, um in a very interesting workplace environment. I'll put it
Yes.
that way. Yes. I'll put it that way. We met in a very interesting workplace environment. Yes.
Yes. And even the I don't know if it's the saddest part or what.
It is a bright light
It
from
is a bright light, but that's not the only time we've experienced toxicity, whether from our own
right,
experience
exactly.
or experience of our other colleagues across the country who move from place to place and experience the same thing. And so it's the sad part is it's not the only place we can talk about. We have various experiences in
Right.
Black higher ed, white higher ed, PWIs, HBCUs, all of that. We have the experience.
And I think what spoke to me about even this particular case and had me, sort of thinking about my journey. Um, I started teaching. I went back to my alma mater as a young faculty member, um, full of life and vigor, and they'll beat it out of you, right? But because there's something about that space that was important to me, and so I think I was about 24. So when I went back after my master's to teach for what I thought was a year, then I'd go back, I'd do something else. Um, I was literally teaching seniors who were freshmen when I was a senior. So it was always this interesting kind of balancing act that I did. But we knowing about this situation, and my condolences to her family, um that is, it's important. It's a part of your legacy. It's a part of your mission, your ministry. And um it can consume you. And then they for it to be consuming for you, and such a mission and purpose, because that's your place, that's where you want to be. When you don't have leaders who respect you as a human being, when you don't have colleagues in looking the same way down the field, so to speak, as we're in football season at the end, when we don't have that, it becomes so much more difficult to process the day to day, and it will wear you to the depths of your soul, you know. So,
So, to give just to preface this conversation, we're going to talk about our experiences through reading the story and the things that stuck out about us. We want to talk about how toxic culture starts and how easy it is to spread like wildfire and stay there for years. And we also going to talk about, I don't like conversations that just bring up the issues and present nothing.
right.
We always have this conversation on the phone. If someone asks us our opinion, our advice, and we're president, what would we do? But so we're going to give some systemic solutions that I hope can take root and just plant seeds and thoughts in all the leaders, whether they are at the level where they're seeking higher leadership position, they're seeking a board seat, they're seeking other, promotion in higher ed, or they want to do something different, or they see something that they want to do different. I just hope it sparks something in them, because this needs to change. We lose a lot of people just from turnover, and losing them to the point where they love the job, they were jaded, they miss it, but they can't come back to it.
Right.
And they really great leaders exit and just burn out, when we could have those same people working, synthesizing ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and probably be as further along in solving systemic solutions like inequity in higher education and college completion, student success. And we wonder why the value of education keeps declining, is because the people who are actually doing the work are not being appreciated, respected. They're not given the resources or the time. And we've been running, it is a business, I respect that, but we can't build the businesses on the backs of our students, nor the faculty and staff who get the work done day in and day out.
And there was a time, if you talk about it as a business, yes, it is a business. People have to pay the bills, right? But there was a time when everyone ascended at the same time. So you didn't have such a gap between your CEO and your secretary. As Warren Buffett would say, his secretary pays more in taxes than he does, and there's something wrong and problematic about that. So, but it doesn't mean that you can't lead. And what I like to do in terms of my leadership is to lead with humility, to lead with humanity and integrity. And so what you have to recognize, that even in this business model, that the people are making this business work. And so when we talk about student success, when we talk about all of those wonderful things for students, because that's why we're there, we have to take care of the people who are boots on the ground with those students. I remember being an undergrad, I never went to the provost's office. I never went to the president's office. I was in my faculty's offices. And to know when I come back, those things that they hid from me, that I had to learn the hard way, right? That's problematic when you say, well, how do we fix this? Because if my faculty and my staff don't feel valued, that trickles into my student body, and how they feel about their experience. So if we don't really understand how organic leadership is, and every level of leadership that exists on that campus, and treat people as such, as if they are replaced, they're not replaceable, because people are not replaceable. And so in this case, um, And in several different cases, when people leave higher ed and they go, "Oh, we want you back. You should come back," and they talk to, why did you leave? They how why would they come back to be so to have their humanity so disrespected, and they can't go home at the end of the day happy about the work that they did, right? To know that they're doing good work and doing well by people, because that's who the students are. We want them to be good people, but we often don't translate that to treating our people like good people.
Exactly.
So
So when we saw this story, I think you sent it to me first, and then all of a sudden it just blew
yeah,
up on everywhere, social media, news,
yeah,
and we wanted to go live maybe a day or two after, but I was like, let's take a beat, let's study it, learn it, get all everything. And so one of the most compelling interviews that we can always count on this from Roland Martin
yeah,
was from Roland's show. Like that was the best, most
comprehensive,
insightful, comprehensive coverage from every perspective.
right.
And if you have a chance to go watch it, I encourage you to go watch it. It was from yesterday, I think. It was about 30 minutes long.
Hmm.
But in his coverage, he had the letter, the email that she sent to the VP. We don't want to talk about the actual details. We just want to pull some things out that we can recall from that. And so just reading, the first thing that struck me was I work as VP of Student Affairs. I work 24/7 answering emails when I'm at home, staying late in the office. No, I don't want my employees to keep this pace. So I
Hmm.
schedule emails in order to protect their work life boundaries.
Hmm.
However, I cannot do that because that is not an expectation from my supervisor.
Right.
Although I do this with love and I want to get the work done, it was essentially I'm tired. And
Hmm.
so that stuck out to me because we spent hours,
I tell people often that we work
hours.
18 hours a day.
Yeah.
Um, and so here I am at this, at this institution. I have um, uh, this place with 2 bedrooms, and it's a nice little townhouse and a nice little new area. And my cat is enjoying it more than I am because, you know, she was living her best life, right? But that working nonstop, and the question does become, then what did we get done? And we did a lot of work, right? But in those, when we started to take steps back to protect ourselves mentally, but in when we're working 18 hours a day, it's like, there was no reset. I mean, we would be there from 8:30. We might be able to go get something to eat. Um
But we're
and
still talking about work.
we're
We're
still
still doing work.
we're always on and talking about work, and it was so consuming. And when we were able to get out of that, we got so much more done. It was so much more productive that you could actually go home during the daylight. uh, and it was amazing to be able to say, oh, the sun is not down and I can go, and the fact that, and you try to protect your people because you want them to be well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I was. And at a certain point, um I'm my health declined. I was dehydrated, I was having headaches, I was having all of that, because not only are you talking about this monumental task of work, but you're also, dealing with certain leaders who did not appreciate the work that you were doing. I remember staying up all night, um, working on faculty files.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to tell my supervisor, I know you don't probably realize this, but I've got to go home. I've been here all night, and I'm in the same clothes that I was in yesterday. And I only allowed myself like 3 or 4 hour nap. And then I went back to work. I mean, because that was the culture that was set. Yeah. That I mean that that reading hearing that part of that letter all the time. And even the point where she says, and you set timers so that you're not waking up other people with your emails when they go off, right?
Yeah.
And so when I left the HBC, it reminded me also of the fact that that's really, HBCU executive culture in some areas. But when I worked at a PWI didn't get a phone call, an email, a text from Friday at 5. And if I did, it was, I am so sorry to bother you at this time. They respected, they took a break because, it was an interesting sort of change for me to be able to put my
I
phone.
can't I can't speak to that all the way.
I know, right? I know, right? It,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Um that so for the refueling station, why I did it
Hmm.
and where I am now in this business, what I want to do, who I want to serve. I see straight through when people tell me, and even looking back at ourselves and how we do it, it's so easy to have our health, you know, impacted by this.
Hmm.
Just meeting after meeting after meeting, you're not thinking, you're not drinking, you're not eating, you're eating on the fly, you're eating late, you're not getting full hours of rest. You are, and if you keep this up, your brain breaks down.
Hmm.
And so even it can make situations and cultures like these can exacerbate mental health issues, or they can absolutely initiate it
Yes.
because of the constant work of
Mhm.
taking on multiple roles, of the consistent turnover that you got to start over, you got to re-explain. Everybody got a new initiative when they come in.
Mhm.
Every president has to have a different cabinet, and as student success is in academic affairs. Student success is enrollment management. Enrollment management and student affairs is separate. Everybody got to just break it down and say, "Oh, I changed something." And
Right.
so that whole pieces shuffling all the time creates instability,
Hmm.
creates fear because this is tied to my livelihood.
Right.
Creates self-esteem issues and confidence because it's like I'm not getting any work done. Am I really good?
Right.
In essence, you are, but under these conditions with no resources, not proper feedback and guidance and all the things you need to be successful, you
Yeah.
don't have it. And then when people question you, why aren't you getting this done faster, sooner? Why didn't you do this job and this job and this job? And why are these pieces falling apart? And even when mistakes happen, whether we see a lot of student affairs rest hall things on the news because people don't have these things like, well, why can't they get them their steps together? They haven't slept.
That's right.
Things keep changing.
That's right.
We have in meetings and none of the meetings matter all at the same time. And
We
I
have
see
meetings
straight
about
through
meetings.
that.
We have meetings about meetings, and nothing. It just I feel so bad for those who have to work res life, student affairs. They've got to plan all these things. Somebody's not going to be happy if some. And then here's the thing about the mistakes. Mistakes will happen, but it's how you handle your employees when those mistakes happen, because everybody needs to feel that though I'm working as best I can, something may slip through and I'm not going to be beaten up as if the mistake means that I am a terrible person. And that's the kind of situation that we found ourselves in. Like every mistake was really about our character. But when you're trying to juggle 10 different things at the same time with maybe just you and one other person, how do something may fall. um but then I need to be able, as a leader, I should be able to say, let me get you some help.
Yeah.
But if we take those mistakes and make them something is wrong with you as a human being because you made a mistake, you create such anxiety, such fear, such, it becomes that toxic workplace that people talk about out there in the world, but don't want to admit that they're in or that they've created.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and having a place where, um that we had an I was at one institution where we had an incident where a young lady was so afraid she got phished by email, and she sent out all of our information because she thought it was from the CEO. She was so afraid not to respond quickly that she didn't check. So here we have this entire quagmire, but you've created an atmosphere where someone was so afraid not to think and sit and go, wait a minute, this isn't him or her. This is a phishing email. You are grinning. Go ahead. You want to laugh so bad. Go ahead.
Oh gosh.
But you still bad about it. I know.
I am. I am, but I understand. And
Right.
that's the part. I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't give people the time and the inputs they need to rest and come refreshed and have cognitive time to think through issues and to
Right.
think it through and to all collaborate with everybody at the table, you're going to have these crazy silos and blow ups.
Mm-hmm.
And we gotta put on a good face for the parents and everybody else who's watching us.
Right.
But when you don't allow that the cognitive inputs to think and bring great ideas to fruition, and everybody looks at different sides, like you need that time. You
Mm-hmm.
need that time, but often we don't have it because we're running different things, or we don't have the resources to do that.
Right.
And that, I think, that adds to the toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we can't help the resources, but if we add to the fact that our leaders don't understand that we're doing our best, that adds that's another layer on top of it. if
Right.
if our leaders don't understand that you keep doing these new things, or
Mm-hmm.
you don't tell your leader above you to say, hey, my team is at max capacity, unless you give us some people, these are our priorities, these other things we can't do or needs to be done later, or this is the quality of which you're going to get them. Unless you have that conversation and can advocate for your team and everybody gets it up the line, um that's when that's where change happens, or that's good or bad. That's where the change either stops or starts,
Right.
is at the leadership level.
And here's the thing, for most HBCUs, a lot of HBCUs, I won't say most, but a lot of HBCUs, your executive and mid-level administrators are women, are Black women, and they're taking the weight of this because of all of it working well, right? And they have
The
families.
personal competency.
Right. They're taking all of that on, and so when they don't have leaders to say, "Hey, stop," um, stop, just wait, you know. Um, and I'll tell you, and I know I've told you this before, but I want to make it public. You had, and I know you're gonna know, what I'm gonna say. Um, you had a staff member, and for your listening audience, Dr. Wheeler or Aaron was the youngest person on her staff, and she was in charge. Um, and so her staff member who had retired from the school district, it was an alum of this institution, came to me one day. I used to have tea with the VP. Came to me and said, this is the first time he ever felt valued as an employee. It's the only time that he felt listened to, because you created a space for him to have ideas, for him to think, for y'all to collaborate, for him to feel as if he was really working on a team. Now, this is somebody who has retired from teaching, who has been in the business, who has been in education all those years. But that was the first time. And I think that says a lot about who you were. And I tell that to anyone who asks me, right? That's my go-to Aaron story. I'm sure she has a couple of go to. They not as nice and kind probably for me, but that's the kind of leadership that we really need to aspire to. That people feel valued when they come into your office, into your space, because what you're asking them to do is to put the student's success and their experience really on their backs.
Yeah. I think so. In our conversation of toxic leader versus toxic culture, we're
Mm,
in a toxic culture.
yeah.
And when I think about this, when you share that story, the image that came through my mind, sometimes you're not really you on certain sci-fi movies. And it
Mhm.
might have been this scene might have been in one of the sci-fi movies that you decided to watch. But for all of our Marvel heads, when Captain America puts up his shield, but he's still like shielding from fire or anything else, it's still hot.
Right.
It's still hot, but everything else underneath is protected.
Exactly.
And that's what I strive to be.
Hmm.
Sometimes I wasn't, able to do that 100% of the time, but that's what I strive to be, that person to put in the gap, especially because my team was student success. And I knew if they weren't, their hearts wasn't fully in it and they was one foot out the door, they were worried about everything else, who's getting fired, who's doing this. And I said, literally one team meeting, yes, we're going through budget cuts. Yes, we're doing all of this, but I need you to focus
Hmm. Hmm.
on the students. If you focused on that, everything else
Falling.
would impact. And we did that. And guess what? Student success improved 15% retention in just that little time. We were still having all these little fires everywhere all the time.
Right.
But I tried to shield them so much that they could keep their heads down, they can keep their jobs, and I can have something to defend when I say, nah, we can't take no more cuts over here.
It's right.
So
Yeah. And it's the same thing. So you had staff, but in terms of working on the faculty side, I know what it's like to teach 4 classes.
yeah.
I know what it's like to teach 4 classes. And I had a faculty member come in, and I had just been promoted. And I did everything, promoted into this particular role. And she said, I'm tired of eating soup and ramen noodles. So, in the very long and glorious week that I was acting president at this institution, I'm not going to say the name, y'all can Google it. That was one of the first things I did, was to try to right side the budget and salary scale, because it was so far off. But when you have people who are still coming, and one of the best faculty members you have, and she says, I can no longer eat ramen noodles and soup, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And in my leadership, in terms, those kinds of things, because you don't know what they're dealing with. And these are Black women for the most part, right? And all faculty. But to find out who they are as human beings, what is it that they want to do? Who is it that they want to become in this field? Um, and it's not to beat them down so much that they can't go anywhere else. And that's what I think is so key in terms of leadership, that you have to hear and see what's going on with your people as human beings.
As human beings.
As human beings. And so if someone says, I need a break, I had one faculty member was losing I mean, and it's male, but he was really having a hard time with the political climate. He was really emotionally and mentally afraid of what was happening to the country, and it was affecting him. And it's like that with so many of our faculty and staff members. They're not operating, once they come on your campus, they're not operating in vacuums. They don't just do that 8 to 10, because most of them do 10.
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
to it's not fair to say you're a salary position and you need to work
24 hours.
until you get the job done, but you say, well, don't bring your home problems at work. Well, my work is intruding on my home problems.
Exactly. Like
You can't have it both ways. You
mm-mm.
can't have it both ways.
And you can't have me at my best self if I can't get, out of 7 days, if I can't get at least 2 good nights of rest.
And That's a minimum.
That's the minimum. That's the minimum. And that should even be on the weekend. But that's not the case. Because what we also understand when you get into higher ed is that students live on that campus 7 days a week. It is literally a 7 day a week job. So in the meantime, you want to lead your people so that when you need to call them on that Saturday, or something happens, that they are rested enough, they're not dragging, they can think clearly, they can help you problem solve. And you're not sitting around the table and everybody's going because they
Yeah.
don't know what to do. They haven't had the breath to do it. For 1 year, I didn't have the time to even go through the Chronicle.
What, look, what is that?
Right. I didn't have the time. And when I went there, I had these, I wanted to help bring an institution to the point where they were the front page of the Chronicle. We got in there, but it wasn't always but not even having the cognitive rest, which is what you taught me, the cognitive rest in your science background to think things through is important. And then you start having people go, whatever, he's gonna, he or she will yell and scream and whatever, I'm just gonna go in my office and just wait for it to be over. And you create that toxicity. And so what happens? You want them to leave it at home, leave their problems at home. And they take those work problems and they take that toxicity home and they talk about it. And then you go, well, why are people talking about this institution in the street in a negative way?
Yeah.
Which is your recruitment. It infects and affects your recruitment, your retention, all of those things, your faculty retention, your staff retention. Because if you got all this turnover because people go, no, don't go work there.
Yeah. I want to talk about presidential leadership and the
Mm,
profiles.
yeah.
Like, I would say it's been. I feel like what's the profile of presidents? What are the traits that boards look for? I don't know if they truly know what they need. Sometimes I don't know if they're looking for. I don't know if they know what it takes to get there. But you've been in presidential
Mm-hmm.
searches, both sides.
Right.
What can you build a profile of a leader who fosters this type of toxicity, regardless of gender,
Right.
race, place, everything? Like I said, actually, I did not say higher education is the second most toxic workplace in America. Who is number one? Can you guess it?
No.
K through 12 education. Education.
Makes perfect sense. Perfect sense.
We
Perfect
just
sense.
passed it on. Yeah, we just passed it on.
It's
So
great.
yes, I want to center it because it is toxic. There, where it's nuanced, it can be nuanced in certain contexts. We can talk about Black women. We can talk about toxicity at PWIs. We can talk about toxicity at HBCUs. Each are going to have different things, but in overall,
Mm-hmm.
it's crazy.
So if I were creating a toxic leadership profile,
Yeah, essentially.
the first thing that I would probably check for is how they responded in emails. I would check how once you for me, I'm even one of those people that I watch how you speak to the wait staff. Because if you're dismissive of them when you're giving your order and you don't say hello and you don't, then there's something about you that doesn't see that person. And so that's going to extend and how you treat the staff and faculty because you're up here. But I think a toxic leader, first of all, if you look at someone's CV and they have moved around every 2 or 3 years, that's a red flag for me. And if the first thing that they talk about is someone else's fault, if they've never taken accountability for what happened at that institution or done any real work to say, you know what, I could have done this a little bit better. And that takes time in a space. A toxic leader um, always expects perfection from everyone else but themselves. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah.
um, a toxic leader makes speaks inappropriately about the people that they worked with, um, and or are still working with. Um, they listen to outsiders more than trying to find out. If I hear the street committee one more time, if I hear a leader say the street committee says, or the street, what that tells me that you're not seeking truth and really trying to understand what's going on. You just like to gossip.
But that doesn't come out in interviews. And we've all said in presidential town halls. So what when a candidate selected and you're looking back to say what did they see or say to say that they like we need this type of person? How do we get this type? Like, do they not check for like what are they checking for
If they're
and what are they
checking,
not?
so one of the things that in my as a presidential search candidate and asked me what is the greatest threat to student success, and I said mental health, or being able to tell someone, and they say, are you coming to all the basketball games? If a presidential leader or a dean or a provost says, oh yeah, I'm gonna be at all the basketball games, I'm gonna be at all the football games, I'm doing all of that, particularly for a president, if they answer in the affirmative for all of those types of things, they are going to be toxic. You know why? Because they haven't been honest. They can't. I told the group, I said, I can't do that. I said, if I'm here, I'll do that. But I can't chase a check out there and raise money, which is what I'm charged to do, and be at every basketball game and football game and soccer and volleyball game. But if I'm here, you have me fully, that of course I will. But if they can't be honest in those questions and to say, no, let's think of it and be in a collaborative conversation and not just answering the questions to get the job and telling you what they think you want to hear. Yes, I'll be at everything. Oh, yes. Well, I can, well, we need such and such. Sometimes you get those questions at every level of executive leadership. Well, we need X, Y, and Z. Faculty members, staff members, we need X, Y, and Z. And I have to say, honestly, I have to look at the budget. I hear you. And the way I do a budget is X, Y, and Z. And it's very clear. I'm very clear about that. We set the priorities. It's not, I can't, because there's only so much money. But if I say, oh yeah, we can take care of that, that's somebody who's going to be toxic because they've already started off the relationship with a lie.
Have you ever been asked the question about how you manage or lead people? Like, what
Oh, of
is your
course.
leadership?
Of course.
What do you think they were looking for? What answers?
They were looking for a good old boy answer.
Give us an example.
Well, what we need somebody to come in here and it's really messed up around here. We need somebody to clean house, and we need so they're looking for someone who's going to come in and wreak havoc. And if you are thinking about people who work for you, if I give you an answer of humility and honesty and integrity, and I say, well, the first thing I do is wait to see. Because what they want to do now, what happens is when you have a toxic leader who comes in and starts firing people, then those alarms get phone calls, and alarms get phone calls, and then you got to go back and backtrack it, and then all of it breaks loose, right? You get a phone call from somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody. But to be honest, and I've been asked that several times, I do not come in without making a formal assessment. One of my mentors told me, whoever brings a bone will take one. So you have to also be wary of that first person who hits your office with who's wrong and who ought to go and who needs to do, because you have not assessed. So when I'm asked that question, I always say, fear not, I want to make an assessment first. And I do. I would make an assessment because some people have matured into their jobs and maybe that's not their passion anymore. But it doesn't mean that these people don't have bills and lives and they haven't been there. Because what we have to understand also is that executive leadership is transient.
Yeah.
And so a toxic leader doesn't recognize you have, especially a president, you have 5 or 6 years. These faculty and staff live here. They are from here. This is their home. And if you don't recognize that going in and make an assessment, where are they supposed to go? What are they supposed to do? Now, sometimes you have to make the hard decisions. And I think that the toxic leader doesn't consider the people that they're making those decisions for.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been in situations where I had to say, listen, I, you're forcing my hand. You have children, you got bills. I just need you to do this for me. And then sometimes it has to be, and to quote you, Dr. Wheeler, this is where we are. You have to release people to their destiny. But that has to be at a point, not the first thing you do.
Yeah, no, that was chance after chance after
Right,
chance.
right. And for me, it's when I do that, when I have to release somebody to their destiny, and that's what I like to call it. I need to make sure that I can sleep at night knowing that I've done everything that I can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk about, we talked about the bad leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So going into this, the systemic solutions,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we can't not talk about this until we start at the top, tippity top. Which are the boards?
Yes, boards need to be trained. They need to have experience in this. A lot of times, your boards are stacked with business people, but not people who understand higher ed and the humanity of higher ed.
Well, they also start with business people who probably run their companies like.
Right. Are their boards toxic? Are these board members coming from toxic workplaces? Or is this their first time being in a position of power?
Mm-hmm.
You have to be wary of that. And I think board trainings are so important. And then they've got to figure out and do their work systemically in order to decide that they do not want a toxic workplace.
So we can reimagine board training. What,
Mm-hmm.
what would be the first three to four items
Mm-hmm.
if we were asked to design a board training?
Mm. So many. Can we just do away with all of them? Let's see. Excuse me. One of I want them to have a psychological profile. I'm sorry. I do. I want them to have a psychological profile because I
Or
think
why they're doing it? Why
right.
why why are you doing it? Because I think boards often come with notoriety,
Hmm.
networking, power.
And
But
I
there
think
are so many things that they don't have a chance to really, while there is a dance you have to do, they
mhm,
can't come so far, but at
right.
some point you have to learn what's going on or listen better to the
Hmm.
people who are telling you.
The psychological.
And yeah, before you form an opinion or say, or like you said, take things from the street to govern this, or you have,
Right.
what is your
They also
what is
have to
your
understand the
vision?
chain
Yeah.
of command. Excuse me. They have to understand chain of command. They have to understand how higher ed works. How does tenure work? How do how does recruitment work? What is really needed? And so many times they want results, but they have not thought about the journey of that, right? Um, so I think if to understand um, how to deal with people, Like I said, is this a power trip for them? I don't know. For a lot of them, it is. Um, I they have to. They're supposed to have mandatory trainings. Um, and how to function as a board. The other thing that is most toxic is when the board implodes and you've got a real problem.
Yeah. Because you can't pay me enough to think that the board didn't know what was going on and
No.
who they picked. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking particularly about the situation in Lincoln
Yes.
University. They could not have known what was going on before this happened.
Right. Even the decision to promote someone to a presidency out of the the academic space, out of the academic space, was problematic. A lot of people will make this about race. I'll just put it out there. A lot of people will make this about race, but
It's
you
not
pull
about race at
someone.
all.
No, but not completely. Um, but when you pull somebody out of the academic space in the space that they were in athletics, as we've said, as I said last night when we talked, it's very much run like this sort of coach team beat you up kind of thing, right? Run, 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 run. But this is not a football field. This is and uh so those kinds of appointments from the jump, when you don't follow best practices, when you need a president, usually the line of succession is your provost. They're in the space, they're already doing it. When you don't follow the best practices line of succession, now if you have a problem with your provost going up, then that's a whole nother conversation, right?
Yeah.
But when you don't follow the best practices of how that happens, then um, you have situations like this.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure best practices in that's already in there. And you saying they just don't follow it.
They just don't follow it. To follow the best practices, and what that means is that, but you also have to say, okay, something doesn't is not working, and be
Yeah.
able to say. And I think that's what the other part of what makes a toxic workplace toxic is that when something doesn't work, just say it and change it. You don't
Yeah.
have to keep throwing good money, or as my pastor would say, you kicking against the brick for what? You know, everybody can see that this is not working. It's not working. Why you keep kicking against the brick? Because now you don't want to go back because you let your ego and your pride get into not being able to say, you know what, this didn't work. Let's try something else. But what they don't realize is that your employees will appreciate and respect it much more if you say, hey, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else.
Yeah.
And
So we
yeah,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No. Finish.
Well, one thing about it is that a lot of toxic leaders, if it's not their idea, then it's not a good one. And
Yeah.
that just doesn't work. That just doesn't work. Just because it's not my idea doesn't mean it's not a good one. And be able to.
So we could reimagine the presidential and executive leadership search. So with board selection and training, the only thing I'll add is that what they gotta know what real leadership is. Look
Mm-hmm.
at some other examples, pull some qualities, and know how to find it
Mm-hmm.
in a president, and know how to manage the president as well, because the president is their direct report. But if you put in all the pressure on them and you're not managing them as well, they're going to spew that to their cabinet, that urgency, the 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 unrealistic expectations,
Mm-hmm.
the under resourced, the lack of ideas. They'll be like, well, I don't know how to do it. That's your job. Well, let us do our job then. If you
Right.
don't know how to do it.
You
So
know,
it spews to the cabinet, and then it just goes down and down and down to everybody's
it is
in
trickle down and it is finest. Because boards are sometimes political appointments if you're dealing with state institutions. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes they're political at private institutions. But when you're playing politics, remember that you're playing politics with the health of that institution.
Yeah.
And if the board is not configured well and the board doesn't follow best practices and they've hired someone who and they're putting, as you say, putting that pressure on them, then that board puts pressure on the president, puts pressure on the cabinet. You got turnover. And there should never be a time that you have 3 VPs hired in the same position in less than a year.
Yeah.
When you have that kind of turnover, it's time to go back and look at who you're dealing with, and what kind of leadership is happening on the day to day.
And that's what I want to bring into reimagine presidential and executive leadership search.
Mm-hmm.
Being in the world of exiting, not stepping away from every little bit and going strictly into nonprofit, I've learned a whole different world of making sure the right people are there, because we nonprofits don't really have that much money and autonomy and time
Mm-hmm.
to keep having turnover. So the last job and I appreciate it. It's still the process there to this day.
Mm-hmm.
But I had 6 or 7 levels of interview for the executive director position. I thought it was just for that, but every role in the org had that same thing. It wasn't anything different, but at each time they vetted something different about me. And each different people had an up close look. It wasn't just me answering questions. It was, I had to produce some artifact so they can really see what I could do. I feel like that needs to happen. And like I said, you've been in more presidential searches, and it's usually you do your telephone, you do your filtering with the search, the executive search firm filters you there. You'll have an interview, a little phone interview with them again, and then you might get to the board and do a fly-in, and then they'll bring you to campus, and then they'll ask you, different people will ask you questions, students, faculty, staff, community. Board will ask you some more questions, and then you get hired.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
That's usually how it happens. The hiring part doesn't happen. Usually if you're going up against an interim, but that's for a whole nother conversation. That's for a whole nother conversation, folks. But yeah, that you need to go through those various, excuse me, go through those various stages to see how people engage and interact. What I think is important is that they're asking you for artifacts. Sometimes the toxicity can seep through and you miss it because somebody can make you feel good over lunch, over dinner, on a Zoom, and you're having a good time, but you don't really know what kind of work or who they are. Because and I'm not doing due diligence and doing that. I'm going to give you a list of names. I would give someone Dr. Wheeler's name, right? But they may need to ask somebody who's not on my list. And that's key. Ask someone who's not on the list. Whether it's a good or bad review, you have to also be able to discern where that review is coming from. Everyone, and to understand as a leader, everyone won't like every decision that you make. You may not like every answer that I give you, but if you can determine if a leader is honest with you or they're just telling you what they want to hear to get the job, then that's different.
Yeah.
So, I would suggest that boards start to go off list. And so it's something that we don't really talk about in higher ed, but the infamous someone made a call. I'm just someone makes a call. Give someone a shot. Give this person a shot. Someone makes a call, or they did this particular program, or they did this. That has nothing to do with who they are as a leader.
Yeah. I think because higher ed, every company is about people. So I'm starting to see all of these articles about, and it happens every time there's a crisis or something big. It's like, oh, we need empathetic leadership. No, this is not new.
It's not new.
And you can't single that out. We need dynamic leaders who know how to not manage people, because that gets us into toxicity, but actually lead people through inspiring and knowing what they truly need in order to be productive and
Mhm.
efficient,
Right.
and understanding that you can't build any university or any company on their backs,
Right.
that they are the most important resource here and
Mhm.
not the money.
My aunt was. I come from educators, but mostly in they were secondary ed. My father was in higher ed, but she would young teacher. She would go home with all these papers to grade, and her principal said, "Leave that stuff here. That's what you have a planning period for, because I need you to go home and be rested to deal with these knuckleheads when you get back tomorrow."
Yeah.
That to me, and hearing those kinds of things at their knee is important, in terms of making sure that people are rested, making sure that people have empathy. You have to have empathy for the people who work for you.
Yeah, but
We
that's not, I don't want, and I know we're going to start saying it. We need, that's going to be the profile, which is not going to get us, we're going to be
empathetic,
back in the same boat when you just put,
empathetic, transformative.
yeah, yeah, dynamic, transformative, where you
Right.
can, you're going to have to make the sniper calls one day.
Mm-hmm.
Some days you may need to
Mm-hmm.
spray bullets.
Right.
Some days you may need to smile and pull out coloring books at
Or
your
send
team
people
meeting.
home, or send people home because they have lost their minds and they're driving you crazy. Um, or they're sick. One thing we have to stop doing is allowing people mental health days. We have to allow people, if you are not feeling well, to send them home. And sometimes you have to send an email to their staff that says, do not contact her for anything. If you need to, contact me. And so sometimes that's what you must do, in order to be efficient, in order to that when you have to do the spraying, people can respect it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they have to know that when you have to make those hard decisions, not only can you make them, but that you have not made them without full thought about what must be done.
Mm-hmm.
That
And
that
I
is.
think another thing to add to this selection, I want to see how they interact with their cabinets. We talked about multiple
Mm,
turnovers, and we've seen this at multiple universities in the first 2 or 3 years. The presidents just fly through cabinets
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
every, like they just, the whole cabinet turned over.
2 or 3
I
times.
need to see how you interact with them. I
Well,
need to see how you meet with them, how you checking in, what's going on, how many times. Like I need to see that part,
mm-hmm,
because that's the foundation of the university as well. Because
right.
if they're not well and they're not operating, you don't give them the autonomy and support to get it done, and you're patient enough to listen to every little piece and help them solve the problems and move things around and be thoughtful all the time. Um, that's where it all goes wrong, is at the top.
It does. And it is, and you can follow those tops keep changing depending on what level you're in, right? But
Mm-hmm.
having been on a cabinet that changed over 2 or 3 times by the time I got there, and was still changing, um, there was so much toxicity in the space, um, that the cabinet couldn't even work together at that point.
Yeah.
Or you never, and I've had friends on other cabinets where you don't get close to your colleagues because you don't know if you're gonna be there tomorrow or they won't. So
Or you can't trust them.
I know, because anything you say will go back and be like, so and so said, again, these street committees, um, or they know how to rile up a leader. And so if you're not already grounded in who you are as a leader, and if you're in that position, you don't have to put your foot on anybody's neck to be, it just reeks of imposter syndrome, um that you can treat people fairly and well. In a case where if someone is not working out well, you still need to, I'm sorry, that's my laptop. You still need to be able to give feedback, because that's not their final stop. And you want them to be better. You want them to say, okay, well, next time this is what needs to happen. It's just not a good fit for us right now.
Yeah. For the
But be
good of higher
guided.
ed too.
Right, right.
So they
But
don't go to other institutions and keep wreaking havoc.
right. And if you don't have that feedback or give them that kind of support to be better in their roles, and if this is what they want to do, that's where real leadership is not about telling people what to do. It's about allowing them to do what it is to affect the vision that you have. But
Yeah.
leaders who think, hey, I'm going to just tell people what to do and bark, 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 it doesn't work. It never works. And that's why you have cabinet turnover, because at some point someone says, I did not spend all this money and still going to school to have somebody bark and talk to me this way.
Yeah.
And so that becomes the way cabinets function, because of it, or go into dysfunction because they can't trust it.
Mhm. Yeah, that bullying so close, I think, was a key piece in this. And people think bullying is like name calling, but
Mm-mm.
bullying is belittling you
Berating you. Mm-hmm.
in a way that is it crosses the line and it's the death by a thousand cuts.
But also, and then people snap, or they go off. And I had a moment like that. So I will, it goes down in history. And I was in a place where it's so bad, as I'm mildly claustrophobic, and I told you I was going to tell this story. And I didn't have my phone with me because I was just going downstairs. I was going just one. I could have walked the stairs. I didn't. Whatever. I got on the elevator, and the elevator got stuck. And I had to stand there and think about whether or not I was going to let somebody know I was in there, because it was the only peace I'd had in weeks. So that when they opened the doors and I'm sitting there with my eyes closed and my legs stretched out in front of me, they thought I had passed out. I was in the best place of my at that point, like singing gospel and jazz tunes to myself right down there. Me, Ray Charles, and Lena Horne. We just having a good old time.
It was the best plausible excuse for you not to be working or taking emails. I was stuck
Yeah,
in
I mean,
elevator.
I
I'm
didn't
gonna
even
take
have.
advantage of this.
I took advantage and I sat down in my nice outfit, and I just was like, that they thought I had passed out for real. But that moment where I had to stand there and say, how long can I get away with not letting anybody know I'm in here?
Yeah.
That's a moment. And my supervisor to this day, and that hurt me more than anything. Mechanical, fine, whatever. Check it off the bucket list. Never asked me, was I okay?
Yeah.
And that hurt.
And I think even if leaders start to ask and genuinely ask, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
And be willing to have 10 minutes at the top of your check-in for that.
Right.
Don't BS me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna see it on your face.
Mm-hmm.
Give it a little time. If they just start to do that, that will change things. And don't use it against them.
Right.
Let it go.
Right.
Understand where they are, but understand that they're trying to still do their work in light of what they
Right.
just told you.
Right. And respectful of that. Celebrate that. That here's somebody who is in physical pain, emotional pain, and they're still trying to get this done. I have to then be the leader to say, I need you to go home.
Yeah.
Just today. Just go get a massage. Go. Just do nothing. Just go home
Or
for a moment.
keep a pulse. I've been seeing you. We've all been here for a week.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody got to be on campus. Let's alternate next week of who's taking time off. That is the leader who cares about getting the work done. And you disarm people with saying, well, I got to work. I got to do exactly. No, I'm going to do what's best for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be the model of well-being. I'm going to model it for you, but you also have to start getting people out of this mindset
Right.
of doing that. And I know we would have handled the situation differently, very different. We've handled it differently before. We've all had mental breaks in time, and you're like, Aaron,
Yes.
go home.
Yes.
This person go home, and we're all in academic affairs working. But I think that is the difference. And I know the last point that we have is prioritize wellness initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's good. But before we do that, there's we say wellness, but there's in my coaching practice, there's multiple layers of wellness:
Yes.
career, financial, social, community, all of those physical wellness.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing that um, universities and colleges can do is making sure that the people who have their hearts in this, who've been there the most, they can afford to do the work
Right.
and not be stressed out because of money. So right siding and making sure everybody is paid equitably instead of having big gaps
Mm-hmm.
in places is the first, because yoga ain't gonna help me
Right.
if I,
Medical.
one, I don't have time, two, I
Right.
gotta be late, and three, I don't my paycheck, I gotta worry about how I'm gonna make the bill stretch.
And
The
I think
money.
I think that every institution, having now in 2024, having been out of COVID for almost a year, though if we watch these numbers, we may be going back. How did you thank your employees when you came back? How did you give them a Christmas ham,
A
Thanksgiving
pizza
turkey,
party.
a piece of, like, what did you do to say, because they're going through it at the same time as the students. They're trying to negotiate and navigate this new normal of being at home, just like the students, and they're expected to be online. They're expected to engage, and they're doing that, and they did that for almost 2 years. What did you do to say to them as individuals, thank you?
Probably not. Nothing.
Are they still, that kind of thing means a lot.
Yeah.
When for student loan borrowers, did I always say, and I mine have not been paid off, so I'm still hopeful. But did you make that easy? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Did That should have been like a whole day. Y'all, come on, we're gonna sit down and get these forms done, because everybody who works at higher ed works for a nonprofit.
Yeah.
That kind of assistance and time and dedication means that you see me, so I'm not paying for this. It's amazing to me, and I love to see colleges and universities. I think the latest one was, I want to say FAMU, but I'm not sure, to wipe out debt for their students in their graduating class, all of those kinds of things. But faculty members have been paying since 1990, since 2000 or 2004. What so those kinds of considerations, the big endowments that are for student scholarships, but no one ever talks about faculty and staff development and salaries.
Yeah. And as faculty and staff development, the leadership piece,
Mm-hmm.
we have to stop. We have to make sure that everybody's capable of leading, not necessarily the technical knowledge for each of their roles, but
Mm-hmm.
they have the training, the coaching to lead people and not just manage things, because we all pick up leadership habit. We inherit leadership habits from
Right.
people that we were led by. And so we think that's right because they've been in this position, and we pick it up and we try to do that same thing. And that's how toxicity prevails again, because we're always being forced and shoved, but there's no mandatory leadership. This
Right.
is how you coach your staff. This is how you um my cousin, I think she just started watching psychological profile.
Yes, yes, it's like, yeah.
Yes, but we need training at all levels,
Mm-hmm.
especially management,
Yeah.
because again, we need to cut out some pieces, but also build a new generation of leaders. So once they start off as, assistant coordinator, dean, director, they move up and they have aspirations to become president,
Mm-hmm.
they already know how to do these things. But instead, we shove people in leadership roles that don't either have the time
Mm-hmm.
to go to leadership, they don't know where to start in
Right.
leadership development. We say we don't have money for them because everybody else is flying to this place and this place and this place.
Mm-hmm.
And the people at the bottom don't have the resources to even know how to lead, which that's closer to the frontline staff.
Right. Exactly. I think, with leadership development, and also this, it goes back to this toxicity that when people work well together, that somehow in some areas that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
that they don't want people to work well together because somehow they're in cahoots or collusion or whatever it is, and you're trying to work together. And it not only did it happen with the two of us, it's happened everywhere, anywhere else I go. I've worked with black women, and people sometimes had a problem with that I worked well in my role, with black women, with other black women, and that's problematic. I can't, we have to start thinking about our own mindset. And we talk about leadership development and promoting ourselves, promoting people, and making sure that they have uh, the tools to do that, and making that investment um, in them, not just in a workplace sort of trajectory, but are they good people when they go from one spot to the next?
Mm-hmm.
How I have to do, not just that they got the work done. How did they get the work done?
Yeah. And
How
how
did
did
they?
they let the title affect them? Because
Oh my God.
we've
Yes.
all we've all seen the power vacuum and how good people who gets in the spot in leadership positions lose their minds,
Oh my
lose
God.
them.
That is, and you just go, the ink is not dry on your transcript, child. Those anyway, but just once you've been doing it so long, it's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah,
Um and I think that's just so much more to leadership than getting the work done. Is how you did it and how you made people feel along the way. Do they
yeah,
want to work with you again? I have been out of higher ed administration for 5 years now, 6 years now, 2017. Oh, 7 years now. The 7 year itch. But since we're both Game of Thrones fans, and I have just decided that I am Jon Snow, and I'm going to get it. Jon Snow was a natural leader, and I mean, I'm not tooting my own horn, but and then just decided, you know what, I'm just gonna go off in the woods. I don't have time to deal with with these people and this toxicity. I'm gonna go off with the wildlings and go into the woods. So
yeah. And I do think as we wrap up, if you're in a toxic place,
yeah,
higher ed, but also I think I say higher ed, but it's also hard. I mean, it's also hard everywhere. I think higher ed nonprofit, we do it because we love doing the work and we want to do the impact. And we stay there longer than what we have to because it's become our identity,
yeah,
because we feel like it's tied to our mission and purpose. And we get so close minded that we feel like we can't do it or go any place else to do what we love and what we're good at. So there's two edges to the sword. I started Refueling Station to speak to, we can't change the system. We gotta do some work ourselves to get
yeah.
into a place where we are appreciated, happy, not just happy, joyous,
Hmm.
and we're not sacrificing our soul and our health over something.
Hmm.
And so that's the refueling station part of this, is that individual thing. If you are in a bad place and our careers are so much tied to our livelihood and our identity, it's hard to figure out and to make that next step. But you got to realize what's bigger, your health and your life is valuable. And you also have to understand that there's options. There's options. You can always come back, but there's options. And you just have to do your research and dig and dig and dig to make sure this culture is right. And if something shifts to where the culture isn't right, you
Hmm.
have to ask yourself, how long am I going to give it to change before it impacts me? And so if you are feeling depressed, or you feel like you don't have options, or you're feeling stuck and exhausted with your job, I want you to say, hey, I am valuable. I can take my talents elsewhere and I will be okay. But staying in a place like this is going to damage your health, your mental and emotional health
Hmm.
more than what you probably think it has already done to you.
Right.
So I really do. If you're watching, that is my charge to you. Refueling, we talk about this all the time. Refueling station, of how jobs can actually impact us, not just going to work, but I talk about how even the rumination of you being in a biased environment or you experiencing racism in the workplace actually has on your thought, and then it hits your blood pressure, it hits your cortisol and your blood pressure. Like,
Hmm.
it's so easy to stroke out, as we've seen in 2 Black presidents passed away on the job
Yes.
late last year under stress. So, and it's the constant go of it all. So figure out how to do it. I know some people, we can't really leave. I'm going to charge you to just think about what it's like and start to think about how can I depart from places where it's impacting me and how to do it. If you start to just think about it, your brain will lead you to options, and you'll start looking and thinking, and then all of a sudden there's a way out. But if you keep thinking that there's not a way out, you're always going to be there.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. I knew this is going to go over.
Yes.
This is good.
I'm sorry.
And so we were both TV movie heads, and if you didn't know that my favorite show, The Game, was a backdoor pilot. I didn't even know what that was called. It was a backdoor pilot to The Girlfriends.
Oh,
So there's this one episode where they introduced storyline of Derwin and Melanie on The Girlfriends, and Joan was her auntie. Joan had never came back, but
right.
they did a backdoor pilot. So this is a backdoor pilot to a podcast that we've been talking about for years,
Yes.
called Allegedly Higher. And we'll talk about all the things higher ed, but we're also going to talk about how it interfaces with pop culture and probably all the crazy things that she's seen on TikTok, not me. All the things that are going on, plus some things that are going on in higher ed news, and we're gonna meld all those things together with some leadership and good tips and advice. So a little professional development, a little breakfast club.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, a little bit of all of that, and Allegedly Higher coming soon. Since we said it, we got to do it. That was a promise we made ourselves. So thank you for joining. If you know anybody in higher ed, pass this video to them. If you know that they're, not truly happy or experiencing some toxic things, not just in higher ed, but everywhere, share this video with them. And as always, I'm executive leadership coach. I have helped a lot of people find their way out of burnout in different places. So if you want to DM me or go to gracefulproductive.com to set up a mini coaching session to see how you could get unstuck and get somewhere else where you can be appreciated and thrive, I'm definitely here to help you. So thank you, Dr. Jackson, for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone who joined us on Insta. I think we Insta ended us like 19 minutes ago, but everybody else who's watching on Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube, thank you for watching. Tune in to this show later, and we'll have more information about Allegedly Higher. Bye-bye.
Bye.